During the Second World War, when supply chains collapsed and soldiers were cut off behind enemy lines, the difference between life and death often came down to whether a person could feed themselves with whatever the land offered. Many soldiers, especially reconnaissance scouts, resistance fighters, and downed pilots, were trained in fieldcraft that never appeared in official manuals. These were the traps you were supposed to build when you had no proper equipment, no rope, and no bait. They were the kind of tools you carved out of desperation, but refined through experience. And while they appear simple, these forgotten methods made it possible for isolated fighters to stay alive for weeks at a time. Today, they stand as some of the most overlooked survival skills modern outdoorsmen can learn, especially for those who prefer low-tech, self-reliant solutions. The reason these World War II traps are so compelling is that they were designed for realism, not theory. They weren't crafted for hobbyists or sportsmen. They were built by people who needed calories to keep moving and who had no margin for error. Whether you're a historian fascinated by wartime fieldcraft or, a survivalist building skills for worst-case scenarios, these traps really show how much can be accomplished with nothing but wood, gravity and, knowledge. Many World War II soldiers survived because, honestly, they relied on tension traps built from the landscape itself. One of the most widespread field expedient traps used by soldiers in Eastern Europe and the Pacific was the tension bow trap. It used a bent sapling as the power source, which meant the trap required no rope or metal springs. Soldiers would cut a flexible green branch, pin it down, and create a trigger carved entirely from wood. Once set, the trap launched a snare loop upward or sideways with enough force to catch rabbits, birds, and in rare cases, small game like foxes. To use this method today, begin by scouting for a thin, springy sapling around chest height. Bend it down and gauge its strength. If it can snap back violently when released, it's a good candidate. Carve 2 wooden stakes, one to hold the sapling down and another to form the trigger. The key is friction control. The stakes should interlock, but not jam. Create a loop from natural cordage, such as inner tree bark fibres or braided grasses. Set the loop along an animal path. Tension the sapling and lock it with the trigger stakes. When an animal brushes the loop, the trigger slips and the sapling snaps upright, tightening the snare instantly. This system requires only a knife and patience, just as it did during the war. Downed pilots often used deadfall traps because they required no cordage at all. Airmen shot down in remote areas, whether in the Balkans, Burma or the Philippines, relied on deadfall traps because they could be assembled in just a few minutes. These traps used a heavy rock or log suspended over a bait site with a wooden trigger system known as the figure 4. When an animal nudged the trigger, the weight fell and pinned it instantly. To replicate this today, you need to select a flat stone or a heavy log. Then carve 3 sticks, 1 vertical upright, 1 diagonal stick, and 1 horizontal bait stick. The ends must be carved so they interlock without slipping, When balanced properly, the weight of the stone rests entirely on the tension created by the three pieces. Even the slightest movement knocks the structure out of alignment, dropping the weight right away. While bait was sometimes used during the war, many soldiers set these along natural choke points or at the mouths of burrows. The trap works because gravity is reliable and requires no stored tension, making it an excellent low-tech method in emergencies. Resistance fighters mastered trail snares because they understood exactly how animals move. In the forests of Poland and Belarus, resistance groups used trail snares not only for food, but also to avoid leaving clear signs of human activity. These snares were simple loops placed at the right height along narrow game paths. The trick was placement. Fighters knew that rabbits, hares and foxes often ran along tight paths that funneled through underbrush. Instead of spreading traps randomly, they studied terrain and let the animal's own habits guide the setup. To apply this today, find the narrowest part of a trail, ideally between two shrubs or under a low branch. A snare loop should sit at the exact height of the target animal's head. A rabbit snare is best placed a hand's width above the ground and sized slightly larger than a fist. Carve a wooden peg to anchor the snare and push it deep into the ground. Even without proper cordage, you can make a functional loop by twisting inner bark fibers or splitting long green branches. The goal is to blend your trap into the surrounding terrain so the animal continues its normal movement without hesitation. In the Pacific jungles, soldiers stranded near streams used a method called the funnel weir trap. They built a narrow, V-shaped fence of sticks that pointed downstream, with the wide end facing upstream. As fish swam with the current, they were funneled into the narrow end and trapped. This method required almost no tools and allowed exhausted soldiers to gather food without exerting precious calories. Anyone near a stream can build a small version of this by collecting branches and jamming them into the riverbed in a V formation. The key is ensuring the opening is wide enough for fish to enter, but narrow enough at the end that they cannot escape. If you angle the sticks upward, the fish swim into the enclosure and cannot find their way back out. It's simple, effective, and, well, honestly, one of the most energy-efficient food traps ever used in wartime survival. These forgotten traps worked because they embraced simplicity, patience, and natural behavior. The real value of these World War II survival traps is not the woodcraft itself, but, the mindset. Every trap relied on understanding natural movement, using the materials at hand, and accepting that the environment provides everything if you know how to arrange it. These methods replaced gear with knowledge, and that is really the heart of real survival skill. If these forgotten World War II trapping methods sparked your interest, make sure to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom. Share this guide with anyone who values real historical survival knowledge, and help keep these lost skills alive for future generations.